Successful people think differently because they're not worried about other people's judgment. While the world criticizes, they create. While most people are busy protecting their reputation, they're too busy searching for the truth. And here's the key. Thinking differently is not an aesthetic choice. It's an intellectual survival skill. If you think like everyone else, you'll end up with the same results as everyone else. And the average is harsh. Uninspiring jobs, lives with no purpose, routines where people wake up, work, complain, and go to sleep. Nothing more. Is that really living? Or is it just surviving? Pay close attention now, because this may change the course of your life. Think differently or die average. Stop believing what everyone else believes. Stop repeating what everyone else says. Every success story begins with someone who dared to disagree with normality. Not because they wanted to look rebellious, but because curiosity was stronger than the fear of judgment. And it's this curiosity, directed and disciplined, that opens doors the average will never see. So think differently. And if you decide to think differently, prepare yourself for something greater. The freedom to learn anything, to create paths no one has created, to master your own mind. Listen carefully now, because what I'm about to reveal lies behind every genius mind: curiosity. Ordinary people lose curiosity over time. They accept ready-made answers, stop asking questions, stop investigating. They think they already know enough. And that's the moment mediocrity sets in. Now look at the people who truly stood out. Scientists, entrepreneurs, creative leaders. They all had one thing in common. They never stopped asking questions. Even if they didn't understand something, they would ask again and again and again until the answer finally made sense in their mind. This is the first step to thinking differently. Many people are embarrassed to raise their hand and say, "I don't understand," afraid of being criticized. In a classroom, the student who asks too many questions is easily labeled as stupid. But the truth is exactly the opposite. The one who asks questions is one step ahead. The one who questions shows the courage to learn. That's why, if you want to start thinking differently, begin with the simple act of admitting your doubt. The courage to ask is the mark of someone who refuses to remain ordinary. Now pay attention to me, because I'll show you how to truly think differently. Thinking differently is a daily exercise in intellectual freedom. The first step is to do what you love. When you work or study something that sparks passion, your energy multiplies. Normal is waking up tired because you spend energy on activities that don't inspire you. Different is waking up hungry for life because you're investing your time in what makes sense. Ask yourself, if nobody judged me, what would I choose to learn, to create, or to build? That answer points to your true path. Second, protect your mental independence. That means not letting other people's opinions become the filter for what you think or do. Most people fear being criticized, fear being called strange. But remember, everyone who changed the world was ridiculed before they were applauded. Thinking differently always bothers people because it exposes the mediocrity of those who follow the herd. Third, feed your curiosity without fear. Ask, test, explore. That's the fuel of innovation. Don't accept anything just because everyone does it this way. Ask yourself, is there another way? The simple act of questioning already puts you on another level. Fourth, simplify your life to free up energy for the essential. Those who think like everyone else get lost in excess. Those who think differently focus on what matters. If you're exhausted, it's hard to have the clarity to think in a new way. Energy is born from being aligned with purpose, eliminating the unnecessary, and putting strength into what truly moves your life. Pay close attention now, because what I'm about to tell you is one of the mind's biggest prisons, the fear of being different. Most people don't live their own ideas. They live other people's ideas. They're shaped by the opinions of family, friends, society, the media. They spend life trying to please, to fit in, to be accepted. But those who think differently understand something simple. If you always seek approval, you'll never have clarity. To think differently, you must learn to shield your mind against the pressure of the majority. And that starts with a daily exercise. Every time you feel tempted to do something just because everyone does it, stop and ask, does this really make sense to me? Does it bring me closer to what I want? Or does it just make me like everyone else? That simple question is enough to expose the automatic choices that keep you stuck in the average. Remember, life is too short to live dependent on other people's approval. Another point, choose carefully the voices you listen to. I'm not saying ignore everything and everyone, but be discerning. Ask yourself, does this person have results I admire? Do they live what they preach? Or do they just repeat what they've heard? If not, why give their opinion so much weight? Learn to separate constructive criticism from noise. And here's a powerful detail. The courage to stand by your own vision earns respect, even from those who disagree. At first, you may be criticized. You may even be ridiculed. But over time, when results appear, the same people who laughed at you go quiet. Nothing is more convincing than the evidence of a life lived with purpose and authenticity. Thinking differently is swimming against the current. It's bearing the pressure of judgment without giving in. It's choosing the clarity of your conscience over the empty applause of the crowd. And when you train yourself in this, you realize that freedom isn't being accepted. It's living true to what you believe, even if no one claps. Thinking differently isn't an inborn talent. It's a trained habit. You're not born outside the box. You build the box and then learn to break it every day. That takes discipline, and discipline is born from rituals. If you want to stand out, you need to turn curiosity and mental independence into concrete actions that shape how you think. The first ritual is the daily question. Pick any situation in your life and ask, why is this done this way? Don't accept the first answer. Go deeper. Who said it has to be like this? Is there a better, simpler, faster way to do it? When repeated every day, this exercise trains your mind not to settle for ready-made answers. The second ritual is explaining out loud. When you learn something new, don't keep it to yourself. Explain it. Even if it's to the mirror. When you speak, your mind organizes, your ideas align, and the gaps show up. That's the moment you discover if you truly understood. This simple habit will accelerate your ability to learn 10 times more than someone who only reads and repeats. The third ritual is creative review. At the end of the day, take one idea or important concept you learned and recreate it in your own words. Use a metaphor, a story, an example from your life. This act of recreation makes the idea stop being external and become part of you. It's in this act that different thinking begins to flourish. And finally, the ritual of conscious observation. Set aside a few minutes to observe something ordinary and ask yourself, what is no one else seeing here? It could be an object, a situation, even a conversation. This practice trains your eyes to see beyond the obvious. That's how innovations are born, from someone who looked at the ordinary and saw the extraordinary. Those who practice these rituals don't just think differently, they begin to live on another level of perception. And that difference builds up day after day until it becomes an advantage impossible to ignore. But here's the truth. The path of those who think differently is never easy. They are misunderstood, judged, often humiliated. The crowd cannot stand those who break the pattern, because independent thinking exposes the mediocrity of those who prefer to follow the herd. It's easier to call someone crazy than to admit they might have seen something you didn't. But listen, every great person you admire went through this. Galileo was condemned for seeing beyond what the church accepted. Bruce Lee was ridiculed for mixing styles and creating his own philosophy. All of them were seen as too different until the world had to bow to the evidence of what they built. And here's the secret few have the courage to accept. Thinking differently is expensive in the beginning, but it pays dividends forever. The rejection you feel today is the same energy that will fuel your victory tomorrow. This is the path of those who refuse to die average. They choose truth over acceptance, curiosity over indifference, courage over fear. And with that, they build something that lasts, something that inspires, something that cannot be erased. So I tell you, if you want to think differently, be prepared to be misunderstood, be ready to be criticized, but also be certain that in the end you will be remembered. Because no one remembers the crowd that merely repeated. History remembers the names of those who dared to be unique. Think differently, protect your flame, and never bow to mediocrity. Because in the end, you either have the courage to live as an exception, or you accept dying as just another in the average. Now it's on you. I want you to prove to yourself that you've chosen to think differently. Write in the comments, "I will never accept dying being influenced." This phrase is more than words. It's a pact with your mind, a declaration that you will not bow to mediocrity. And if you enjoyed this lesson, leave your like. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, because here you'll keep receiving ideas that will challenge your mind, expand your vision, and accelerate your learning. Remember, those who think like the majority live like the majority, but those who choose to think differently create a destiny the crowd could never imagine.
Let me tell you something that's going to make you uncomfortable. The difference between the rich and everyone else isn't what you think it is. It's not intelligence. It's not education. It's not even luck or connections or family money. Apause, I've spent years studying successful people. Not just the wealthy, but the truly successful. The people who built something meaningful, who created lasting value, who went from nothing to extraordinary. And I found one single habit that shows up in every single one of them, including Richard Feynman, who wasn't trying to get rich but ended up incredibly successful anyway. This habit isn't sexy. It's not what motivational speakers talk about. It's not what business books teach. It's so simple that when I tell you what it is, you're going to think I'm wasting your time. But this habit is the difference, the real difference, between people who accumulate wealth and success and people who work just as hard but stay broke, between people who create value and people who just exchange time for money. Direct address? And here's what's going to shock you. Most people actively avoid this habit. They think it's a waste of time. They think it's inefficient. They think successful people must be doing something else, something more complicated. They're wrong. Today, I'm going to show you this habit. I'm going to prove why it works. And I'm going to show you exactly how to implement it starting today. Because once you understand this habit, once you really get why it separates the rich from everyone else, you can't unsee it. You'll start noticing who has it and who doesn't. And you'll understand why some people keep winning while others keep struggling. So walk across stage, or let me start with a story, because this story reveals everything. It's the 1940s. Feynman is at Los Alamos working on the Manhattan Project, the atomic bomb, and they're paying him, not a fortune, but decent money, more than he's ever made before. And you know what he does with his free time? When he's not working on the bomb, when he could be relaxing, playing, doing anything, he studies, he thinks. He works on physics problems that have nothing to do with his job. Problems nobody's paying him to solve. Problems that seem completely pointless. His colleagues think he's crazy. Feynman, you're already working all day on the most important project in the world. Why are you spending your free time on random physics problems? And Feynman says something interesting. He says, I'm not working. I'm playing. I'm figuring things out. I'm building my understanding. So let that land as I fast forward 20 years. Those pointless problems he worked on. They led to quantum electrodynamics, Nobel Prize, revolutionary discoveries, consulting opportunities, speaking fees, book deals. The work he did for free, for fun, for no reason other than curiosity. That work made him far more successful and wealthy than his actual paid job ever could. Ours make the connection. And that's the habit. That's the difference. That's what separates the rich from everyone else. Our direct statement of the rich invest in assets that compound. The poor trade time for money. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, I've heard this before. Let me show you what this really means. Because most people completely misunderstand this concept. Foxtrot explained carefully. When most people hear invest in assets, they think about money, stocks, business investments. But that's not what I'm talking about. That's not what separated Feynman from everyone else. That's not what separates the truly wealthy from the merely high income. The habit is this: investing your time in building knowledge, skills, and understanding that compound over time. Most people trade their time for money. They work, they get paid, they stop working, the money stops. Linear relationship. 40 hours of work equals 1 paycheck. Stop working those 40 hours, you don't get the paycheck. But the rich, they invest time in building something that pays them repeatedly. Knowledge that solves multiple problems. Skills that create multiple opportunities. Understanding that generates multiple insights. Make it concrete. Feynman invested time in deeply understanding physics. Not just learning equations, not just memorizing facts, deeply understanding how the universe works. And that understanding, it paid him over and over. Every problem he solved used that understanding. Every lecture he gave drew from that understanding. Every book he wrote leveraged that understanding. Every consulting opportunity came from that understanding. Point one investment of time, multiple returns. That's compound interest. That's how you get rich. But most people don't do this. Let me show you what most people do instead. Tell this story. I was talking to someone recently. Smart person, hardworking, complaining about being broke. I asked, what did you do last weekend? Watched Netflix, played video games, scrolled social media. What about the weekend before? Same. And what are you doing this weekend? Probably the same. A pause. Or now. I'm not judging leisure time. I'm not saying you can't relax. But here's the question. What are you building? Every weekend, every evening, every bit of free time. Are you building something that compounds? Or are you just consuming and forgetting? Make the contrast of the rich use their time to build assets, knowledge, skills, networks, understanding, systems, content, intellectual property. The poor use their time to consume, entertainment, distraction, information they'll forget, experiences that don't compound. Refresh you jet directees, and the gap between these two approaches gets bigger every single year because the person building assets, their returns compound. They get exponentially better. Their knowledge builds on itself. Their skills reinforce each other. Their network grows through referrals. The person consuming, they're in the same place. Same skills, same knowledge, same capabilities. They might have new memories from Netflix shows, but nothing that creates value. Falls or posy, that's why the rich get richer. Not because they're greedy. Not because the system is rigged. But because they're investing in compounding assets while everyone else is renting their time. Tell another Feynman story. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. Concrete example. Feynman is teaching at Caltech. They're paying him a salary to teach. And he takes that job seriously. He prepares lectures. He meets with students. He does his job. But he also does something else. He invests enormous time in understanding how to teach, how to explain, how to make complex ideas simple. Just build this, he doesn't have to do this. Nobody's paying him extra to be the best teacher. He could do adequate lectures and still get his paycheck. But he invests the time. He thinks deeply about education. He experiments with different approaches. He refines his explanations. He makes teaching itself a subject of study, a share the payoff, and what happens? Those lectures become legendary. Students record them. They get published as the Feynman Lectures on Physics. They sell millions of copies. They're still selling today, decades after his death. His investment in understanding teaching, something nobody paid him extra to do, created an asset that pays indefinitely. Book royalties, licensing fees, reputation that led to speaking opportunities. Hakem make the point, one investment in learning how to teach well. Infinite returns. That's the habit. That's the difference. Address the objection. Now, some of you are thinking, that's great for Feynman. He was a genius physicist. I'm not. How does this apply to me? Let me show you. Let me give you examples from people who aren't Nobel Prize winners. Share modern examples There's a plumber I know, been plumbing for 20 years, makes decent money, not rich but comfortable. Most plumbers at his level. They come home, they're tired, they watch TV, they relax. Nothing wrong with that. But this guy, he spent his evenings for 2 years building a YouTube channel, teaching people basic plumbing repairs, how to fix a leaky faucet, how to unclog a drain, how to replace a toilet. She continue the story. Was anyone paying him to make those videos? No. Did it take time away from relaxing? Yes. Did his friends think he was crazy? Absolutely. But now that channel makes more than his plumbing business. Passive income, ad revenue, sponsorships, product recommendations, online courses. He invested time in creating an asset, his knowledge shared publicly. And now that asset pays him while he sleeps. Another example, or take this woman I met. She's an accountant, normal job. Normal salary, but she noticed she kept answering the same tax questions from friends and family. So she started a blog. Every week, she'd write one post explaining a common tax question in simple terms. Did this for 3 years. Nobody paid her for it, just invested her time. The doctor share the result is now. That blog gets hundreds of thousands of visitors. She's written an e-book that sells constantly. She gets consulting clients from it. She's become a recognized expert in her niche. Her salary from her accounting job hasn't changed much, but her wealth has exploded because she built an asset that compounds. Make it universal to see the pattern. It's not about being a genius. It's not about having some special talent. It's about investing time in building assets instead of just trading time for money. Get philosophical now. Here's why most people don't do this. Here's why most people stay poor even when they work hard. Because building assets feels like wasted time. It doesn't pay immediately. It doesn't show results right away. It looks like you're working for free. Free explain the psychology. Trading time for money feels good. You work 8 hours. You get paid. Immediate gratification. Clear cause and effect. You can see the value of your time. Building assets feels bad. You work for months or years with no pay. No immediate results. No clear progress. It feels like you're wasting time that could be earning money. Ace pointer, so most people choose the thing that feels good but keeps them poor. They trade time for money, linear returns, no compounding. The rich do the thing that feels uncomfortable but makes them wealthy. They build assets. Even when it doesn't pay immediately, even when it seems pointless, even when everyone thinks they're crazy. Fair share personal example here. Let me tell you about my own experience with this. 5 years ago, I was trading time for money, freelancing, working hard, making decent income, but capped, because there are only so many hours I could work. And I decided to start writing, not for clients, not for money, just writing publicly about things I was learning, investing time in building a body of work. Aish continues, my freelance clients thought I was stupid. Why are you spending time writing for free when you could be taking more paid work? Because I understood the habit. I understood that building an asset, even unpaid, would compound in ways that hourly work never could. I share the results of fast forward 5 years. That body of work, it's led to speaking opportunities, book deals, consulting clients who pay 10 times what my hourly rate used to be, products I've created, systems I've built. My income has increased 5 times, not because I work 5 times more hours, because I built assets that compound. Pause, that's the difference. That's the habit. That's what separates the rich from everyone else. Packer get practical. So how do you actually implement this? How do you start building compounding assets instead of just trading time for money? Let me give you the framework, the exact process you can use starting today. Present this clearly. First, identify what you know that others want to know. Everyone knows something. Everyone has skills. Everyone has experience. What's yours? Maybe you're good at Excel. Maybe you understand social media. Maybe you know how to negotiate. Maybe you've figured out how to budget effectively. Maybe you understand gardening. Maybe you can cook well. Continue. Don't dismiss it as everyone knows this. They don't. What's obvious to you is mysterious to someone else. What's easy for you is hard for someone else. Find that thing, the knowledge or skill you have that others would benefit from. Second step is document your knowledge publicly. This is crucial. Don't just know things, share them publicly, where people can find them, where they create value, where they compound. Write blog posts, make videos, tutorials, build courses, start a podcast, share on social media. Doesn't matter what format. What matters is that you're creating assets that exist independently of your time. Research explain why, when you document knowledge publicly, you create assets. Those blog posts, they work for you 24/7. Those videos, they reach people while you sleep. Those tutorials, they help people in different time zones. One investment of time, infinite potential returns. Third step of third, do this consistently for at least 2 years. This is where most people fail. They try for 2 months. They don't see immediate results. They quit, but assets take time to compound. Feynman didn't become famous overnight. That plumber didn't blow up in 6 months. That accountant didn't get rich in 1 year. Make this clear, consistency over time is what creates compounding. One blog post does nothing. 100 blog posts start to matter. 500 blog posts make you an authority. One video is invisible. 100 videos build an audience. 500 videos create a business. All right, fourth step, reinvest your returns. As your assets start paying off, and they will, don't just spend that money. Use it to build more assets. Use the time freedom to learn more. Use the money to hire help so you can create more. This is how compounding accelerates. The returns from your assets help you build more assets, which generate more returns, which let you build more assets. Make it concrete. That plumber, his YouTube income let him hire someone to help with his plumbing business, which freed up his time to make more videos, which grew his channel faster, which generated more income, compounding on top of compounding. Pause, bring it together. So that's the framework. Identify what you know. Document it publicly. Do it consistently for 2 years. Reinvest your returns. 4 steps. Simple. Not easy, but simple. Address the resistances now. I know what you're thinking. I know the objections that are coming up. I don't have time. I'm already working full time. I have a family. I have obligations. Respond to this if Feynman had obligations too. He was working on the atomic bomb. He had a dying wife. He had responsibilities. But he found time, not by working more hours, by choosing differently about his free time, by investing instead of consuming. You make it practically. You don't need 8 hours a day. You need 1 hour, 3 times a week. That's it. 3 hours a week invested in building assets instead of consuming content. 3 hours a week for 2 years. That's about 300 hours total. That's enough to create something significant, a course, a substantial body of written work, a serious YouTube channel, a valuable skill set. Compare that to 300 hours of Netflix. Which one compounds? Which one makes you richer? Another objections. But what if I fail? What if I spend all this time and nothing happens? Let me tell you about Feynman's approach to this. Share this story. Feynman worked on problems for years that went nowhere. He explored ideas that didn't pan out. He invested time in approaches that failed. But he never considered that time wasted. Why? Because even when specific projects failed, the understanding he built always compounded. Facts explain. When you invest time in learning, in building skills, in creating, even if that specific project doesn't succeed, you're not back at zero. You're ahead. You know more. You can do more. You understand more. That knowledge transfers. Those skills apply elsewhere. That understanding opens new doors. Make the point. The only true failure is not investing at all, not building anything. Just consuming and trading time for money your entire life, because then years pass and you're in the same place. Same skills, same knowledge, same earning potential. Actually, often less because your skills become obsolete and you never updated them. Share a powerful insight. Here's what I've learned studying the wealthy. They all have this abundance mindset about time investment. They don't ask, will this specific thing pay off? They ask, will this make me more capable? Will this build skills that compound? If yes, they invest the time, even if the immediate payoff is unclear, because they trust that capability compounds into opportunities they can't even imagine yet. To tell this story, Feynman spent time learning to draw. Nobody paid him. It wasn't related to physics. His colleagues thought it was a waste, but that investment, it taught him to see things differently, to observe more carefully, to understand visual representation. All of which made him better at physics. Plus, it led to friendships with artists, which exposed him to different ways of thinking, which influenced his approach to problems, which made him more creative in his physics work. One investment, multiple unexpected returns. That's how compounding works. You can't predict all the ways that knowledge and skills will pay off. but you can trust that they will. And Chuck Jet Emotional, let me tell you what really breaks my heart. I see people, smart people, capable people, hardworking people who spend 30 years trading time for money, working hard, making decent incomes, but building nothing that compounds. And then they hit 50, 60, and they realize they can't retire. They can't stop working, because if they stop trading time for money, the money stops. They have no assets, nothing that pays them without their active labor. Posy, that's the trap. That's what happens when you don't invest in compounding assets. You work hard your entire life, and you're still dependent on your next paycheck. Contrast, but the people who invested time in building assets, their 50s and 60s look completely different. They have books that still sell, courses that still run, investments that still pay, systems that still work, knowledge that still creates opportunities, networks that still generate referrals. They have freedom, real freedom, not just money, but time freedom, because their assets work for them. Thus, make the connection. That's what Feynman had. Even late in life, dying of cancer, his assets were still working. His books were selling. His lectures were being studied. His understanding was creating value. He invested in assets that outlived him. That's the ultimate compound return. Get practical again. So let me give you specific actions. Things you can do this week to start building compounding assets. Present these action 1. Identify one skill you want to build. Something valuable. Something others would pay for or benefit from. Commit to investing 3 hours a week for the next year building that skill. Action 2. Start documenting what you're learning. Blog posts, videos, social media posts, doesn't matter where. Just start creating public artifacts of your knowledge. Action 3. Connect with one person who's further along than you. Learn from them. Build that relationship. Networks compound too. Continue action 4. Cut 3 hours of consumption from your week. 3 hours of TV, social media, gaming, whatever. Replace it with building assets. That's where your investment time comes from. Action 5. Set a 2-year deadline. Commit to doing this for 2 years before judging results, because that's how long compounding takes to become visible. Pause 5 actions. Start this week, not next month, not when you have more time. This week. Tell a final stories. Let me end with one more Feynman story. This one shows the power of compounding over a lifetime. Feynman dies in 1988. He's gone. But his assets keep working. His books keep selling. Millions of copies. Translated into dozens of languages. Students around the world learn from them. His lectures keep teaching. They're online. Free. Millions of views. Inspiring new generations of physicists. Build this eye. His ideas keep spreading. His approach to thinking, his method of understanding, his way of questioning, they influence fields beyond physics, computer science, biology, education, business. His estate keeps earning, royalties, licensing. His family benefits from work he did decades ago. Gossers make the final point, that's the ultimate compound return. Assets that outlive you, work that matters beyond your lifetime, value that perpetuates. And it all started with a simple habit, investing time in building knowledge and sharing it, instead of just trading time for money. Also walk to center stage. So here's what I want you to understand, really understand. The difference between the rich and everyone else isn't complicated. It's not mysterious. It's not unfair. It's a habit, a choice, a way of thinking about time. A direct statement, do you trade your time for money? Or do you invest your time in assets that compound? That single habit, repeated over years, creates all the difference between wealth and poverty, between freedom and dependence, between building something lasting and just getting by. This is positive. You have the same hours as everyone else, the same 24 hours a day, the same 7 days a week. The question is, what are you building with those hours? Final challenge. So here's my challenge to you. Look at your week. Look at where your time goes. How much are you trading for money? How much are you consuming for entertainment? How much are you investing in compounding assets? Be honest, really honest. Pause and then make a change. Take 3 hours, just 3 hours, and invest them in building something that compounds. Do that every week for 2 years. And then tell me if this habit doesn't separate you from where you are now. Tell me if you're not richer. Not just in money, but in capability, in opportunity, in freedom. Final thought, Feynman wasn't trying to get rich. He was trying to understand. But understanding is an asset that compounds into everything, including wealth. That's the lesson. That's the habit. That's the difference. Smile is start building your assets today. Your future wealthy self will thank you. Thank you. A five beat teach. And if you want more insights into how successful people actually think and work, if you want to understand the real habits that separate the achievers from the dreamers, do me a favor, like this video and subscribe to the Mind of Richard Feynman channel. We're uncovering the real principles behind extraordinary success, not motivational fluff, actual practical habits you can implement. Join us, let's build assets together. See you in the next one.
People think they understand gravity, but that feeling comes from repetition, not from knowledge. You grow up dropping things, cups, stones, books. They fall every time. After enough years, your mind stops asking questions. Gravity becomes background noise. It feels as obvious as the floor. That confidence is the problem. Because the moment you try to say what gravity does, in a way that lets you predict something new, the easy words stop working. So let's do only what works. Let's describe what happens, carefully, one step at a time, and refuse to guess ahead. Take an object, any object, hold it still, then let go. It begins to move. Not instantly fast. It starts slow, then faster, then faster. That change in motion happens smoothly. Now repeat the experiment with a different object, different size, different material, different weight in your hand. Let go again. The motion changes in exactly the same way. Not almost, not approximately, the same. Now wait, that already contradicts something most people believe. If you ask someone before the experiment, they expect the heavier thing to fall faster. They do not say it out loud anymore, but their body believes it. Their muscles believe it. Their language still carries it, but the experiment refuses. So we write down what we actually see. Every object, when released near Earth, changes its motion in the same way. That statement is precise. It is not a story. It is not an explanation. It is a fact. Now remove the distractions. Air gets in the way. Feathers flutter. Paper drifts. That has nothing to do with gravity. That is the air pushing back. So we remove the air. Drop objects in a vacuum. Now everything behaves the same way again. So gravity does not depend on shape. It does not depend on material. It does not depend on how heavy the object feels. Whatever gravity is doing, it produces the same change in motion for all objects. Now stop and notice how strange that is, because every other influence we know fails this test. Push two objects with the same shove. The lighter one responds more. Heat two objects with the same flame. They warm differently. Charge two objects. They behave differently depending on what they are. Gravity does not care. That is not a metaphor. That is an experimental distinction. Now, people usually say, gravity pulls things down. That sounds fine until you ask a technical question. Pulls toward where? If gravity pulled down, then down would mean the same direction everywhere, but it does not. People on opposite sides of Earth both fall toward the ground beneath them. Their down directions point toward each other. So gravity is not down, it is inward. Toward what? Toward Earth's mass. That sounds better, but it is still sloppy. Because if mass causes gravity, then more mass should mean a stronger effect on falling speed. But falling speed does not change. So we must separate two ideas that are easy to confuse. First, how strongly gravity acts on an object. Second, how strongly the object resists changes in motion. These are different roles. They do not have to match. But experimentally, they match exactly. Every test ever done shows that the factor that controls how strongly gravity acts is the same factor that controls resistance to motion change. Because they match, they cancel. That cancellation is why all objects fall the same way. We do not explain this cancellation. We use it. Now let's move away from falling objects and make the situation worse. Look at the moon. The moon does not fall straight down. It keeps circling. At first glance, that seems like a different problem. But try this procedure. Imagine the moon with no sideways motion at all. None. Just release it. It falls straight toward Earth. Now give it a little sideways motion. It still falls inward, but now it misses Earth. Give it more sideways motion. It keeps missing. There is no moment where gravity turns off. There is no balance point. The moon is falling the entire time. An orbit is not a suspension. It is continuous falling combined with sideways motion. That is not an interpretation. You can calculate it. You can reproduce it with any object given enough sideways speed. Now pause again. The same rule explains the falling cup and the circling moon without modification. That is already a success. But now comes the next question that ruins comfort. If gravity produces the same change in motion for all objects, why does distance matter? The moon does not fall as fast as the cup, so gravity weakens with distance. How? You measure it. You track motion. You infer how fast motion changes at different distances. You find that the effect decreases in a very specific way as distance increases. Not because we prefer that way, because measurements force it. Now here is the key restraint. We do not say gravity knows distance. We do not say gravity reaches out. We do not say gravity spreads. Those words suggest mechanisms we do not observe. All we say is this. Given a mass arrangement, there is a rule that tells you how motion changes at each place. That rule works. It predicts falling objects. It predicts orbits. It predicts tides. It predicts the timing of motion. That is gravity at this level. No story added. Now, one more reversal before stopping. When you stand still on the ground, you feel weight. When you fall freely, you feel nothing. That sounds backward until you check what is happening. Standing still requires the ground to continually change your motion. Falling does not. So gravity is not what you feel when you fall. You feel gravity when something prevents you from falling. That statement is not abstract. It is operational. You can test it. Stand on a scale. It reads weight. Remove the support. The reading vanishes. Nothing about gravity changed. Only the constraint did. So gravity describes natural motion when no other influence interferes. Now we pick up exactly where the trouble starts. We already know gravity gives the same change in motion to every object at the same place. That part is settled by experiment. We do not argue it anymore. But the effect is not the same everywhere. So now we ask a narrower question. If gravity changes motion, how does that change depend on where you are, not why? How? So we do not imagine, we measure. You track objects that fall from different heights. You time them. You compare. You do the same thing with objects that move sideways, like projectiles. You do it again with the moon, and again with planets. Every time you extract the same quantity, how fast motion changes at a given distance from Earth. You make a table. Distance from Earth, change in motion. Distance larger, change smaller. Now wait, this is important. The decrease is not arbitrary. It is not linear. It is not random. It follows a strict rule. If you double the distance from Earth's center, the effect becomes 4 times weaker. If you triple the distance, it becomes 9 times weaker. That rule shows up everywhere gravity is measured. Now, we do not say why that rule exists yet. We only accept that it is there because it predicts motion correctly. This is where people usually jump too fast and say inverse square law, as if the name explains it. The name explains nothing. It just labels the behavior. So let's build it instead. Imagine you surround Earth with an imaginary shell at some distance. On that shell, you measure how much gravity affects motion. Now imagine a larger shell, farther out. The same Earth is responsible for both effects. Nothing new is added. But the larger shell has more area. So whatever influence is associated with Earth is now spread across a larger region. The same total effect distributed more thinly. That procedure leads exactly to the distance rule we measure. This is not a metaphor. It is a counting argument. If you accept space as three-dimensional, this rule follows. And here is the restraint. We do not say gravity spreads. We do not say gravity flows. We say only this: the numerical rule that fits all measurements behaves this way with distance. Now we test it. We use it to predict the moon's motion. We calculate how much the moon's motion should change if the same rule applies far away. It matches. We use the same rule for planets. It matches again. No adjustment, no extra terms. So now gravity does two things at once. It gives the same change in motion to all objects at the same place, and it changes with distance in a precise, predictable way. That already puts gravity in a special category. But now we push further. If Earth causes gravity, then smaller masses should cause weaker effects. So we ask, can we detect gravity from something other than Earth? This is not easy. The effect is weak, but it can be done. You take large masses. You suspend small test objects nearby. You isolate everything from vibration. You remove air motion. You wait. The test objects move. Not much, but measurably. They accelerate toward the large masses. So gravity is not exclusive to Earth. Every mass contributes. Again, not a story, an observation. Now we combine facts. Every mass affects motion. The effect weakens with distance. The effect treats all test objects the same. From this, we can write a rule that predicts the change in motion given a distribution of mass. This rule does not tell us what gravity is. It tells us what happens. And now comes a subtle but important point. If every mass affects motion, then every object both falls and causes falling. The cup falls toward Earth. Earth falls toward the cup. You do not notice the second part because Earth is hard to move, but it happens. So gravity is mutual. That is not a philosophical statement. It is required for momentum to be conserved. If Earth did not respond at all, motion accounting would fail. Now test that idea. In a system with two similar masses, both move toward each other. In a system with a small mass and a large one, both move, but the smaller one moves more. The same rule predicts both. So gravity does not single out one object as active and the other as passive. Now notice what we still have not said. We have not said gravity pushes. We have not said gravity pulls. We have not said gravity travels. We only describe changes in motion that can be calculated. Now here is where intuition really starts to fail. If gravity depends on distance, and distance depends on motion, then motion affects gravity's effect. That means gravity and motion are linked in a way that force laws usually are not. So let's do a clean experiment. You throw an object sideways. Gravity changes its vertical motion, but not its sideways motion. At least that is what basic measurement says. But now increase the sideways speed. Make it very large. The path curves differently. Eventually, the object no longer hits the ground. It circles. Gravity has not changed. The object's motion has. So gravity does not dictate a path. It dictates how motion changes. That distinction matters. Because once you frame gravity as a rule for how motion changes rather than a push, a lot of confusion disappears. We are not saying what gravity does to objects. We are saying how objects move when gravity is the only influence. That is an operational statement. You can remove all other influences and test it. Now we stop here deliberately, because the next step requires changing how we think about straight motion itself. And if we rush into that too soon, it sounds like wordplay. So we stop with this inventory. Gravity gives the same change in motion to all objects at the same place. It weakens with distance in a precise way. Every mass contributes. Motion under gravity is predictable without knowing what gravity is. That is all we have earned so far. Now we reach the point where the usual force picture starts to crack. Up to now, we have treated gravity as a rule that tells you how motion changes when nothing else interferes. That works for falling objects. It works for orbits. It works for anything you can drop, throw, or track. But there is a deeper test. We ask whether gravity can be removed. Not reduced, not weakened, removed. So we try the cleanest possible experiment. You build a closed box, thick walls, no windows, nothing to look out of. Inside the box you place an object. You release it. It falls. Now you do something else. You put the same box far from Earth. No nearby masses. No measurable gravity at all. You attach a rocket to the box. You fire the rocket so the box accelerates. You release the object again. It falls. Now wait. Falls relative to what? Relative to the box. In both cases, the object moves the same way with respect to the walls of the box. You measure times. You measure distances. You compare motions. You cannot tell which situation you are in. That is not a thought game. It is a rule you can test. If gravity acted differently from acceleration, the motions would differ. They do not. So we arrive at a statement that is almost uncomfortable. Being in a gravitational field and being in an accelerating system produce the same local effects. Not approximately, exactly, as far as experiments can tell. This is not a belief. It is forced by observation. Now slow down. This is delicate. We are not saying gravity is acceleration. We are saying that locally, meaning in a small enough region, there is no experiment that can tell them apart. So any explanation of gravity that depends on a special gravitational push immediately runs into trouble, because acceleration without gravity produces the same effects. Now test this idea again. Inside the accelerating box, objects fall, liquids form surfaces, light travels in straight lines relative to the box. No, wait, that is where it gets interesting. You send a beam of light across the box, sideways. While the light travels, the box accelerates upward. So by the time the light reaches the other wall, the wall has moved. The light hits lower than where it started. So inside the accelerating box, light appears to bend. Now return to the first situation, the box sitting on Earth. If the two situations are indistinguishable, then light must also bend in a gravitational field. That is not optional, that is forced. So now we have a prediction. Light, even though it has no mass in the usual sense, must have its motion affected by gravity. We can test this. We look at light from distant stars as it passes near a massive body. We measure where it appears. It is displaced. The amount matches the prediction. Now pause again. We did not assume gravity pulls on light. We did not add a new rule. We took one experimentally unavoidable statement. Acceleration and gravity are locally indistinguishable, and followed it to a consequence. That consequence is correct. Now look at what just happened to the force picture. A force usually acts on something that resists it. Light does not resist changes in motion the way objects with mass do, yet its path is affected. So gravity cannot be acting like an ordinary force. It cannot be pushing. It cannot be tugging. It is doing something else. But before saying what that something else is, we do another experiment. Inside the falling box, not the accelerating one, the freely falling one, you release objects. They float. They do not fall toward the floor. They stay where they are. Now, wait, that means something important. Inside a freely falling system, gravity disappears. Not approximately, exactly. That is not poetry, that is operational. You can test it. Drop the box, release objects, measure their motion relative to the box. They do not accelerate. So gravity is present when objects are prevented from following their natural motion. Gravity is absent when objects are allowed to follow it. This is the same reversal we noticed earlier with weight. Now we push it further. If gravity vanishes in free fall, then gravity is not something added to motion. It is something that shows up when motion is constrained. That is a dangerous sentence, so let me clean it. We are not saying gravity turns off. We are saying the effects attributed to gravity can be removed by choosing a freely falling frame. That is an experimental fact. Now we ask the next hard question. If gravity can be removed locally by changing motion, then gravity is not a property of objects. It is a property of how motion is described. That sounds abstract, so let's anchor it. Straight motion is defined as motion that requires no intervention. Inside the falling box, objects move straight. Outside the box, standing on the ground, the same motion looks curved. So what counts as straight depends on the situation, and that dependence is controlled by mass distribution. Now notice how carefully we are moving. We have not said anything about space being bent. We have not drawn pictures. We have only said this: the rule that tells you which motions require no intervention depends on where mass is. That is a rule you can use. Given mass arrangement, you can calculate which paths count as natural. And once you know that, everything else follows. Objects follow those paths. Light follows those paths. Clocks follow those paths. Now we stop again, because from here on, the language becomes dangerous if used too early. So we inventory what is now forced on us. Gravity is indistinguishable from acceleration in small regions. Light's motion is affected by gravity. Gravity can be removed locally by free fall. What counts as straight motion depends on mass. None of that is interpretation. All of it is experimental or logical consequence. Now we have to be extremely careful, because this is the place where people usually stop doing physics and start telling stories. So we will not tell stories, we will build rules. Up to now, everything we have said can be checked with falling boxes, clocks, light beams, and motion measurements. No pictures were required, just procedures. Now we ask the next necessary question. If gravity can be removed locally by free fall, but not globally, then what remains? Something must still distinguish one place from another. Otherwise, nothing would ever curve, and the moon would not orbit. So the effect of gravity is not gone, it is just hidden locally. So where does it show up? It shows up when you compare motion in different places. That comparison is unavoidable. Here is the experiment. You take two objects, you place them some distance apart. You release both in free fall. Locally, near each object, everything looks ordinary. No gravity, no acceleration. But now you compare their motion. Do they remain the same distance apart? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Near Earth, two objects dropped side by side slowly move closer together as they fall. That is measurable. They are both falling freely, and yet their separation changes. So gravity has not vanished, it has changed form. Instead of showing up as a force on each object, it shows up as a change in how nearby motions compare. That is not interpretation, that is observation. So now we have to describe gravity in a new way, not as a force acting on objects, but as a rule governing how families of nearby motions evolve relative to one another. This is already enough to abandon the force picture. Because forces act on single objects, what we are now seeing is an effect that shows up only when you compare multiple objects. So gravity is about relationships between motions. Now we tighten it. If you want to describe motion without gravity, you say, objects move in straight lines unless acted on. That definition of straight is operational. You check whether motion requires intervention. Now, in the presence of gravity, that definition breaks. An object that is falling freely requires no intervention, yet its path looks curved when compared to distant reference points. So either the object is not moving straight, or our definition of straight is incomplete. The experiments force the second option. So we refine the rule. Straight motion means motion that requires no local intervention. That is all. Once you adopt that definition, falling objects move straight. Light moves straight. Anything not constrained moves straight. So where does curvature come from? from comparison across space. You compare two locally straight motions in different places, and they do not align. That mismatch is gravity. Now pause. Notice what we have done without saying it out loud. We have moved gravity out of objects and into the structure that compares motion across space and time. But we are still not allowed to say anything vague, so we give ourselves a task. Given a distribution of mass, we want a rule that tells us how locally straight motions compare across space. That rule must predict falling objects, orbits, light, bending, clock, rates, tidal effects, and it must reduce to ordinary motion when gravity is absent. That is a tall order, but it can be done. Now here is the key constraint. The rule cannot depend on what object you use to probe it, because all objects fall the same way. So the rule must depend only on position and motion, not on mass or composition. That immediately rules out many possible descriptions. Now we search for something that satisfies all constraints. We need a mathematical structure that tells you what straight motion means locally, lets straightness vary from place to place, depends only on mass distribution, applies equally to all objects, and light. There is only one known structure that does this cleanly. It is a rule that assigns relationships between nearby positions and times. Once those relationships are specified, straight motion is determined. No force is required, no extra assumptions. Now I will say the dangerous sentence, but only after earning it. Gravity is not something that happens in space and time. It is something that determines how space and time relate motion. That sentence sounds abstract, so let me translate it back into procedure. Given mass distribution, you compute certain relationships between nearby positions and times. From those relationships, you calculate which motions require no intervention. Those motions are what objects follow when left alone. That is gravity. Now test it. You compute those relationships near Earth. You calculate natural paths. They curve inward. You compute them far away. They straighten. You compute them near massive bodies. Light paths curve. You compute clock behavior. Clocks run at different rates in different places. Those are not added effects. They fall out of the same rule. Now pause again. Notice how little we assumed. We did not assume gravity pulls. We did not assume gravity propagates. We did not assume gravity prefers mass. We assumed only what experiments forced: local equivalence of gravity and acceleration, universality of free fall, predictability of motion. Everything else follows. Now here is the last important check before we move on. If this description is correct, then energy and motion accounting must still work. Objects must exchange motion consistently. No energy should appear or vanish. That is not automatic, but when the calculations are done carefully, accounting works. Momentum is conserved. Energy is conserved in the proper sense. So the new description does not break older successes. It contains them. Now we stop again, because the final step is to confront what this description does not tell us, and that matters just as much. Up to now, we have built gravity only from things we are forced to accept. We did not guess what gravity is made of. We did not invent pictures. We did not add causes that cannot be tested. We asked only this: given how motion behaves, what rule predicts it? And we found such a rule. It tells us how to calculate motion when mass is present. It tells us how clocks behave. It tells us how light travels. It tells us how objects fall, orbit, and separate. It does all of that correctly. Now we ask the final question. Does this rule explain gravity? The answer is no. And that is not a failure. That is a fact. Because explanation in the usual sense means reducing one thing to something more familiar. And nothing underneath this rule is more familiar. You can ask what causes gravity, but the question stops being productive. Because gravity is not sitting on top of something simpler, it is already at the bottom of the ladder, as far as we can tell. Now let's be precise about what we mean. We have a rule that takes mass distribution as input and gives motion as output. We do not know why that rule is the rule. We do not know why mass affects motion this way and not another way. We do not know why the cancellation between gravitational action and resistance to motion is exact. We do not know why light follows the same natural paths as objects. Those are not missing pieces of calculation. They are missing pieces of explanation, and physics is honest about that. Now, check something important. Despite not knowing why the rule is what it is, we can use it. We can predict motion with extreme accuracy. We can send objects around Earth and bring them back. We can predict clock differences. We can correct navigation systems. We can predict gravitational waves and detect them. All of that works. So gravity as a theory is complete in one sense and incomplete in another. Complete for prediction, incomplete for explanation. Now notice something subtle. People often feel uneasy about this and try to repair it by adding stories. They say space is curved like a surface. They say mass tells space how to bend. They draw diagrams. Those pictures are not wrong, but they are not the theory. They are translation aids. If you take them too seriously, they mislead you. Because space is not a rubber sheet, and mass does not push on it. The actual theory is a calculation procedure. Given mass distribution, compute certain quantities. From those quantities, compute motion. That is all. Now, one last experimental check. If gravity were an ordinary force, then it should combine with other forces in the same way. But it does not. Gravity affects everything, even energy stored in motion itself. Light bends. Time behaves differently. That already tells you gravity does not sit alongside other forces. It reorganizes the stage on which they act. But, and this is important, that does not mean gravity explains the others. It coexists with them. And here is the remaining problem. When we try to combine gravity with the rules that govern very small systems, things stop working cleanly. Calculations blow up. Predictions fail. Not because gravity is vague, but because our methods clash. So gravity stands in an odd position. It is extremely precise. It is extremely reliable. And it refuses to fit neatly with everything else. That is not something to fix with words. It is something to fix with better rules or to accept as a boundary. Now let me end by undoing one last misunderstanding. People think gravity is mysterious because it is hard to imagine. That is not the problem. Electricity is hard to imagine too. The difference is this. For electricity, we can imagine causes beneath the rule. For gravity, every attempt to do that collapses back into the same rule. So the correct attitude is not comfort, it is discipline. We do not pretend to know more than we do. We do not replace rules with pictures. We use the rule. We test the rule. We respect where it stops answering questions. That is not giving up. That is how physics stays honest. And that is gravity as far as we can take it without lying.
Many people believe that focus is simply forcing yourself to stare at something for hours. But that's as ineffective as trying to push a wall with your bare hands. Here's the secret. Energy must be channeled, not wasted. Just like light, when concentrated into a laser beam, gains the power to cut through steel, your attention, when directed with relentless precision, has the power to break through any barrier in life. Pay close attention to me, because this can change the way you see yourself. Your brain works like a particle accelerator. Billions of electrical signals are firing every second, colliding, crashing, creating new connections. But without direction, all of that activity is chaotic, scattered, without results. When you learn to create focus tracks, the same way physicists guide beams of particles in straight lines with magnetic fields, what was once confusion turns into organized power. This is the first secret to training your brain like a genius. It's not about thinking of everything. It's about thinking of one thing with such intensity that the world around you disappears. And here is where discipline comes in. Don't confuse discipline with suffering. Discipline is, in fact, the art of simplification. If you can't explain something in a simple way, it means you haven't understood it. The same applies to your life. If what you're doing feels too complicated, it's because you haven't yet found the clarity that generates true focus. So here's the first exercise I want you to do. Choose one goal, just one, and write it down in a single sentence. Simple, clear, and direct. If you can't summarize it, then you don't yet understand what you truly want. Now, take a deep breath and reflect. How many years have you lost trying to embrace everything, when in reality the secret was to reduce? Think of Newton. Think of Einstein. Geniuses who dedicated decades to just a handful of questions, and because of that, they achieved greatness. Your focus is your most powerful weapon. Use it like a laser beam. Your brain is like a telescope. If you point it at nothing, you'll see only darkness, but if you adjust the lens and choose a single star, suddenly the entire universe begins to reveal itself. Focus is exactly that. The ability to eliminate the noise so you can see what truly matters. But here's the real question. How do you develop greater focus? Pay attention, because here's the truth almost no one dares to say. Focus is not something you find. It's something you train, exactly like a muscle. No one is born with unshakable discipline, but anyone can build it. Think of the physicist who spends hours adjusting an experiment. Every tiny adjustment is a victory against distraction. The same applies to you. Want more focus? Create environments where distraction has no place. Remove the excess. Eliminate notifications. Write down exactly what you'll do in the next hour and do only that. Does it sound simple? It is simple, but that's precisely why it works. If you can't create an environment that favors focus, then you don't yet understand your own mind. Training focus is training your mind to choose, and every choice is an act of power. Don't fool yourself. Every time you give in to distraction, you're strengthening the muscle of weakness. Every time you say no to an interruption, you're strengthening the muscle of focus. And here's a practical exercise for you. Every single day, set aside 30 minutes to concentrate on just one task without interruptions. If your mind starts to wander, bring it back, no matter how many times it happens. This is exactly like training physical endurance. At first, it hurts, but then you realize that pain transforms into strength. In just a few weeks, you'll have developed the ability to dive deeply into anything you choose. Remember this: the brain is plastic. It molds itself according to how you use it. If you feed it distraction, it becomes scattered. If you feed it focus, it sharpens like a blade. The choice is in your hands. And now let me tell you something that might sting a little. If you quit just because someone laughed at you, it means you haven't yet understood what inner strength really is. If you stop because you feel tired, it means you still haven't realized that the body can always go further when the mind commands. Focus doesn't grow in times of comfort. It's born when you face pain, sacrifice, and still choose to keep going. That's how steel is made, through fire. Here's a powerful habit for you. Before going to sleep, write down in a notebook, what did I do today that brought me closer to my goal? What distracted me? What could I have done better? This simple act, repeated every day, creates a vigilant mind. It's like a scientist reviewing every detail of an experiment until nothing escapes. Do this for just a few weeks and you will no longer be the same person. The regret of not having lived up to your potential is infinitely heavier than the pain of discipline. The pain of waking up early, of studying when you don't feel like it, of pushing forward when nobody believes in you. That pain is temporary, but the regret of not giving your all is eternal. So make a pact with yourself now. Train your mind like a genius. Become unbreakable. Now imagine this. You're facing a difficult problem, one of those that feels impossible. Most people give up because they see the challenge as torture. But a genius looks at that same problem as if it were a game. That's exactly how great minds transform physics into something fascinating. Physicists don't study out of obligation. They play with concepts. They sketch. They create funny metaphors. And that's why they're able to go so deep. And here lies one of the greatest secrets of humanity about learning. When you enjoy what you study, you don't just learn more. You also train focus and discipline to levels that seem almost superhuman. So what's the difference between someone who quits quickly and someone who dives deep into an idea until they master it? The difference lies in emotion. The one who finds joy in the process doesn't need external motivation, because the very act of studying, practicing, or creating becomes its own reward. This is the key you need to understand. Focus is not sustained by brute force, but by fascination. Want to improve your focus and discipline? Transform every task into an experiment. Ask yourself, how can I make this more interesting? How can I see this problem from a new perspective? By doing this, you activate curiosity, and curiosity is like a magnet for the mind. It pulls your attention without effort. The first rule is not to fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. That means you can't trick yourself into believing you have focus if you secretly hate the process. The brain rejects what doesn't make sense to it, but when you connect emotionally with what you're doing, focus arises naturally. And every time you practice this kind of playful, creative study, your discipline grows without you even noticing, because discipline stops being a prison and becomes freedom. Discipline is not just about enduring pain. True discipline is being so deeply involved in what you do, so passionate about it, that continuing becomes the most natural path. That is how you create not only unshakable focus, but a mind that learns and expands every single day. And this, right now, could be the moment when you decide to change everything. Your mind is your greatest weapon. It's not external resources, it's not luck, it's not what others say. It's your ability to train your brain like a genius, to develop relentless focus, to build discipline even when no one else believes in you. That is what will define how far you can go. Stay with me here, because you need to understand this. The world is already full of ordinary people, distracted, trapped in empty routines. But those who decide to master their focus, those who cultivate discipline and curiosity, they become unstoppable. They don't play by the rules, they create the rules. They don't wait for opportunities, they build them. So here's the question. Will you keep being just another face in the crowd? Or will you take command of your mind and transform your life into something extraordinary? Be honest with yourself. How many times have you promised to change, only to give up at the first difficulty? How many times have you let distraction win? That ends today. Make a pact right now. Sacrifice what you must, but never sacrifice your future. Train your brain, sharpen your mind, and success will simply become an inevitable consequence. And I want you to do something right now. Write in the comments, I am unstoppable, to seal this commitment with yourself. This isn't just a phrase, it's an act of decision. Click subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and hit the like button, because this is only the beginning of a journey that can completely transform your life. This is the moment when you stop living as a spectator and start acting as the protagonist. Remember this, regret weighs forever, but discipline shapes champion. In your hands lies the power to write a new story. So stand up, take action, and prove to the world and to yourself that your focus is truly unstoppable.